We're going to talk movies now. Spare a thought for the movie reviewers working in lockdown. Graham Tuckett joins me now. Kia ora, Graham.
Hey, Jesse. Good to see you, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. And I've been looking forward to hearing about this movie. I got very close to seeing it and then didn't manage to, but it looks like it's got plenty of good stuff in it. Under the Volcano.
Yeah, Under the Volcano is terrific, and it's just turned up on a couple of local streaming services, which we can have a talk about as well. It's there seems to be an absolute deluge of really, really good music documentaries turning up online in the last year, especially. There's that great Laurel Canyon one, which I think you've seen and talked about, and the 1971, the year that music changed the world, I think it's called, on Apple TV.
Yeah, got to watch that one. Yeah, I've interviewed the author of the book that was based on. It was a great interview. So kind of cool that they turned it into a documentary. Yeah,
it's a 4 or 5 part, real deep dive, but well worth watching. Anyway, Under the Volcano is basically, it's a film about a part of George Martin's life that I knew nothing about. It's kind of his post-Beatles, I guess his retirement project, or what he went on to after the Beatles, was he bought himself a property on the Caribbean island of Montserrat, which sounds like the most beautiful, idyllic, heavenly place you could possibly go and buy yourself a bit of land. And he, over the course of a couple of years, he constructed an absolute state-of-the-art recording studio there. And basically up sticks from where he had been recording his artists in London at his famous Air Studios. And he just reopened Air Studios on this little Caribbean island of Montserrat. And he didn't have to invite people to come over. It's George Martin. He's the greatest, most successful record producer probably in history. So obviously all the recording artists beat a path to his door and all came there and recorded. And people had 16mm cameras and 8mm cameras running the whole time. So Gracie Otto, who's the daughter of the Australian actor Barry Otto and half-sister to the actress Miranda Otto, she's gone and got a lot of present-day interviews with the people that went through Air Studios at the time between 1979 and 1989, and also has a lot of beautiful archive material. And she's stitched together a really, really nice, likable, it's kind of breezy, but it's an informative documentary about the 10 years that the studio existed and then the actual devastation that caused it to go under.
What happened?
Well, there was a hurricane came through in 1989, which wiped out pretty much every building on the island, was substantially damaged. And they were still talking about how to repair it and whether it was worth repairing, when it turned out that the dormant volcano on the island wasn't quite as dormant as people had been led to believe. And sometime in the early 1990s, the volcano blew up. So to this day, half of the island of Montserrat is still forbidden zone for people to even go in. It's now so dangerous. And George Martin's recording studio was right smack in the middle of it. Luckily, they had a few days, I guess, warning that it was going to happen. So most people on the island were saved. I think there was some death, but there was an evacuation of the island as well. So
a little bit of death, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. It wasn't. The volcano didn't erupt absolutely suddenly. Like, people did have some advance warning that it was coming, but the devastation obviously was massive. So you've got this kind of surreal tale. You've got people like Sting and Stuart Copeland and Elton John and Jimmy Buffett and half of Duran Duran and Lou Reed. Seems to be the only person who didn't like the place. It's like,
he complained about the lack of traffic sound, right?
That's it, yeah. He said, I couldn't record anywhere there was no car noises outside. It just didn't feel natural to me. I just thought, it's the most immortal, iconic 30-second Lou Reed soundbite I've ever heard of, like, you take me to paradise and I'll grumble about it. The other bit I loved is just the Police recorded 2 of their most successful albums ever, including the album, I think Synchronicity, was recorded on this island. But they were famously just not getting along. And even sort of 30 years later, you can still hear it in Stuart Copeland, the drummer, when he talks about Sting. He just says, the first 2 times he refers to him, he doesn't even use his name. He just says, well, our songwriter was having some issues at the time. And I'm like, wow. 30 years later, he still just calls him our songwriter. It's magnificently bitchy. I loved it. So, look,
Oh,
if you're a
good
fan
one.
of the music of the era, and there's a lot of great music, there's a lot of great personalities. It's a nicely stitched together film, Under the Volcano. Which
Very
I
cool.
saw
And where can you see it?
Well, I got this off the my beloved Arrow Street Video in Wellington have started up their own streaming service. So I got Under the Volcano from Arrow Vision. I think it's also available on Apple TV. But I'd hardly recommend you go to either Arrow Vision or you've got Deluxe Cinemas have now started one. The Academy in Auckland have started their own streaming service. So you've got all these locally owned platforms. And basically you've got the staff of what were once your absolutely favourite video shops in the whole country curating the selection of movies available. Like I know that Arrow Street's got about 1,000 movies up. I think the Academy, Deluxe, Roxy in Wellington as well. They've also got several hundred films, and they're adding dozens more every week. So you've now got an option of watching. Firstly, going to a streaming service that's got a really, really nicely curated selection of movies, and also spending your money with a local business to watch a movie, which is a great choice.
Okay, Under the Volcano, not to be confused with Under the Mountain, the Morris G story. Thank you, Graham.
No,
you've also been.
There's also a 1984 movie called Under the Volcano, which is an adaptation of the 1950s or 60s novel as well. So, type in Under the Volcano 2021 and you'll find it.
Tell me about Possessor.
Oh, man, this is dark. This is just about turn me to booze again, Jesse. This is a tough film. Possessor is, as you said, it comes from Brandon Cronenberg, who is the son of the famous David Cronenberg, who, did do Naked Lunch and The Fly and Eastern Promises and many, many, many good films, right back to he kicked off, I think, in the very late 60s or early 70s with stuff like Shiver and Videodrome became a massive cult hit. Anyway, Possessor is from his son, Brandon, who is totally a chip off the old block. Because, if you didn't know that Brandon was David Cronenberg's son, you would still think to yourself, gosh, this is a bit like a David Cronenberg movie, but not in the sense that the son is imitating the dad. He just happens to be good at the same sort of stuff. I'm going to describe the plot, and it is a bit dark, and there is mention of suicide and murder coming up, so be warned for that. Possessor is set not in the future, it's set in a kind of slightly alternative 2008. Like, you recognize it as being the world that we live in, but some of the technology is a bit different. And one of the things that, I guess, government agencies can do is basically insert one person's consciousness into another person, and they can do this without the person ever being aware that it's done. So effectively you turn one person into a kind of drone slave of another. And this technology is used basically to create the perfect assassin. You can inject your agent into the body of somebody who is close to the person you wish to kill, and then they can carry out the murder for you. The really, really sticky bit is then that person then has to themselves die just so the agent can get back to their own reality, which does involve some incredibly graphic and upsetting scenes. Like, this is a genuine horror movie. It's one of the darkest things I've seen for a long time. It's not often you see that.
I don't know if we need that at the moment, Graham.
Yeah, I don't know. But at the same time, it is a brand new release on New Zealand streaming, and it is very, very impressive as well.
Is it?
So, Possessor it's a dark and disturbing film, and it goes to some very, very uncomfortable places. But at the same time, the fact that it's like David Cronenberg's son, Brandon Cronenberg, has produced this, and he's made a film that stands up very, very well to any of his dad's sort of later entries. It's got a really impressive lead performance from Andrea Riseborough, who's kind of like the new Tilda Swinton to me. She's one of those people that only ever seems to turn up in incredibly interesting roles and absolutely blows the roof off with them. She was last seen as the title character, actually, in the Nicolas Cage film Mandy back in 2018. But she's, anything that Andrea Riseborough turns up in, I think, is well worth watching. And I think Possessor, if you are in the mood for some sort of dark but quite cathartic sort of entertainment, then I'd recommend it. I love the fact I was waiting for this film to kind of have the moral cop-out at the end and people to come to their senses and go, what we're doing is evil and we should just stop. And I love the fact that it doesn't do that. It just keeps on going with the same dark vision and doesn't let these people off the hook. It was kind of refreshing to see a film that was so committed to its own internal logic and just laid out the story of these flat-out psychopathic people without apology,
It looks like a pretty good cast. People will remember Jennifer Jason Leigh from her prime.
Of course. Again, Jennifer Jason Leigh, like one of the absolute, like a powerhouse actress. And again, one of those people who only ever seem to turn up in very, very good films. Or maybe it was the fact that she was in them just made them so damn good and memorable. But she plays the sort of senior agent or the handler of Andrea Riseborough's character, who's called Tasia. Sean Bean turns up as the kind of ultimate person to be killed. And Tuppence Middleton, who has been making a lot of waves the last couple of years. She turns up as I can't even describe what she turns up as. It's better you just see the film. It's a
quality horror, huh?
This is a genuine quality horror. It's a real psychological horror that doesn't once sort of play for laughs. And it's not often you get a film like that lately that doesn't just descend into flat-out nastiness and cruelty, but actually has a really, really good, solid story to tell. And it sort of hangs together. It's compelling and it makes sense. It's not pleasant, but it's a hell of it impressive.
What would you compare it to in terms of better-known movies, like The Ring or
It reminds
Saw?
me. It's certainly not in that sort of horrible torture porn sort of category. I can't stand that stuff like Saw and the rest of it. But it reminded me a little bit of Blade Runner at times. It's got that same sort of feeling of an agent doing things that they don't quite understand, but which they are also extremely good at doing. Which I think both Blade Runner and the modern sequel Blade Runner 2049 both had that, of this kind of internal torture of this person who's extremely good at doing this nasty work that they do, but they sort of loathe themselves for it at the same time. So it touches on that ground a lot.
And it's available on something called Shudder.com, which I haven't come across before.
Yeah, again, this is I don't know whether Shudder.com is locally owned per se, but it definitely have a local office out of there's a film distributor in Grey Lynn called, it'll come back to me. Anyway, a local film distributor, they have this platform called Shudder.com, which exists purely for thrillers, horrors, and suspense. Like, it's a very sort of adult platform, but they've got a real, very, very quality lineup of new releases and great sort of golden age vintage horrors and thrillers as well. And it's just nice to have someone to look away from the usual anodyne kind of selection of Netflix and the usual. I like Shudder.com a lot.
Okay, I see it's an AMC streaming service, the big American network, but people can go have a look around if they're interested. And if you're a horror fan, sounds like they've got a good mix of classics and new ones as well. Thanks, Graham.